We're hot. All right, here we go.
Hot,
So I
hot,
want to thank everybody in the studio. We had a couple little technical difficulties working through Skype, but I appreciate everyone. I appreciate everyone taking the time, and Rory here in studio. And I want to thank everyone. I want to thank everybody at K-Var.com. I want to thank everybody who's helped make this happen. Hopefully the live works out on Podbean. I'm not sure. We're still tinkering around with that. And I have a really big update. I'm excited to have on. She always has the mic with me. We have the one and only Dianna Muller. Doo-doo-doo. So I'm really excited about this. This is going to be great. We're going to get an update on everything going on and kind of catch up with Di on what's new, what's exciting, what's going on with the DC project and where things stand, and get a little – I'd like to throw in a little bit of a SHOT Show update too with some of the brands she's working with. So let's dive right in. What do we got going on?
Well, what do we got going on? We got going on Virginia. Are you paying attention to Virginia?
100%. Let's get in.
Virginia. This is amazing. This is, I think they're up to 70, 80 counties out of 90 some odd counties that have declared themselves sanctuary cities. It's, and then we've got a governor, we've got legislators that are, these bills are talking about confiscation, which has really got our side lit up, which we need to stay lit up. I really hope that they don't come back in and say, we'll grandfather you in. You don't have to worry about it, because then our kids are going to pay for the sins of dealing with these people now. So I'm trying to pay attention. I'm trying to connect people in Virginia. We've got several delegates from Virginia and the DC project, and I know that their stories are powerful. We've got one actually from the Vegas, I think it was in Vegas that she was in college about 10 years ago. Amanda Collins, did you know her story? On campus, got raped at knife or gunpoint, like 50 yards away from the campus police department. She was a black belt. She took pride. Her parents taught her how to protect herself, but she's also a concealed carry person that left it in her house because she was going to a gun-free zone. So another gun-free zone victim. She gets raped. It was horrible, and it was even more horrible for the next girl because he raped and killed the next girl. And Amanda says that she knows if she had had her weapon with her that night, that both of their stories would be different.
Yeah, I know it was some years ago that had happened, but she's been a big advocate on why gun-free zones are a bad idea.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we appreciate her sharing. She's in Virginia now, so I don't know. It's just to a tipping point that it's. I've been watching the impeachment, and I've been listening to them talk about how Trump is so horrible and he's a tyrant, and then I turn around and I'm like, I feel like you're projecting. I feel like you're saying that he's guilty of the crimes that you're committing, and then he's behaving in the way in which you're behaving. So
yeah. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy, Di. You brought up a lot of really good stuff right there. The Virginia thing is bananas, and I'm glad you dove right in with that. It's out of control, and this is what happens when people try to create legislature without really knowing the consequences or what's going to happen. We had something similar happen in Swampscott, Massachusetts, where they attempted to do something very similar, and the chief of police, I think it was at the time, came out and said, what do you think? Like, we're going to kick in the doors of everybody's house to take their guns away? I mean, this is crazy. And they essentially are attempting to declare some level of martial law without the backing of the police departments and without the backing of their constituency. It's just they just want to wave a wand and make it happen and just say, this is what we're going to do. And it's going to blow up in their face. And I'm going to tell you, I'll say this as far as the impeachment goes and stuff like this. And I know, Rory, you have an opinion on it too. They're not thinking things through. They're not bringing people to the table like yourself and people to the table. What the president has to do, and I've said this, and I'll be critical for this for a second, and everybody knows my relationship with certain people. They have to bring in a board or bring in a group of gun owners that can sit down and have an educated conversation with a lot of these legislators that are trying to do these things. And it's something that I think needs to be the bigger mission. And, I'll be semi-critical of everyone. Going before Congress is one thing, but we literally have to go state to state and explain to people, you can't just wave a wand and create legislation and expect that to just happen. Like, we're just going to take the guns away. It's not going to work, because no police officer in its own county, city, jurisdiction is going to go into the door of into the house of a city. That is a recipe for disaster. And
can you imagine being a police officer? I'm so glad I'm out of it now. But can you imagine being a police officer and having to decide whether I follow the Constitution or I follow this law that our legislators put up? You know, the people who hid Anne Frank, they were criminals. The people who were looking for Anne Frank, they were following the law. Just because you make something legal doesn't mean it's moral, ethical, or constitutional.
Absolutely.
Get off my soapbox.
No, but you're absolutely right, and this is a big passion play project, I know, for you, but more so even for me, because I was on the phone the other day, and I was talking to a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine back home, and he lives in Massachusetts still, and I said, you know, Charlie Baker's the governor there. I know him. I coached his kids in football. I said, this is what happens when you have people creating laws, and they have issues with their AG there, as you know, and they create laws and they don't know anything about the gun industry, the culture, the people. There's nobody sitting down with them, and it blows my mind that they don't bring anyone to the table to say, let's at least put a coalition together. Let's put a few people together. Let's try to figure out what the issue is and try to fix the issue. And I can't believe it.
Why I started the DC Project is to have those relationships. But you've got to remember that there are some people who are willfully ignorant. They do not want to give us the air. They don't want to know what our side is. They don't want to. They just know they want guns gone, whether they know it or not. It's a power issue. It's for power. It's not because of safety. And if nothing else, I just made a post about that young woman in New York City, last night, that gets murdered by a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old boys, and stabbed to death in a gun-free zone. And I mean, it breaks my heart. I can't imagine the fear that this kid went through. And it just angers me that there are people out there who think that just because you want to take the guns away, that all the evil will go away too. It's just not. It doesn't happen that way.
Well, we've seen this many times. We've seen booze be illegal. We've seen drugs be illegal. We've seen all these things take place, and it's just a scary time. So you brought up some other things too. You brought up the impeachment in that culture, and we just saw, I believe it was, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was a 14-year-old boy that was beat up on a bus for wearing a MAGA hat. This is a crazy time. This is a time where people are lashing out now, and I'll be honest, I'll be political for a second. I'm no expert, but this is why the Democrats will lose, and this is why the Democrats will continue to lose, which it's shocking to me if you do kind of a force field analysis of it. They owned social media. They had every owner in social media in their back pocket, but no one could come along and utilize social media the way that the Trumps did and the way that they've been able to. And now they're almost mad about the way that social media is used now, and they're bitter about it. But he's absolutely right when he puts things out there, and he talks about, Elizabeth Warren drinking a beer in her house and how awkward it is and how she's trying to assimilate. He's absolutely right when he starts to put some of this stuff out there. And listen, we're all guilty of this. I've been guilty of this 1,000 times in the industry. The delivery isn't always great, right? But the end message is sound. His delivery always isn't great. And at the end of the day, he is who he is. He's like a New York City taxi cab driver. He just kind of is what he is. And that's the East Coast in him. And I can relate to that. Whatever pops in his head, he's going to say. But he means it, and he qualifies it. He's kind of like, this is what I think right now. Hey, deal with it. And at the end of the day, we're in a time where they're just trying to crucify him because he's outspoken and he's going to say what's on his mind. At the end...
hang on.
No, go ahead.
It has nothing to do with Trump. I believe that because, and I just saw, walk the streets, ask the college student about how, something, related to the day. And they asked him about Trump and, oh, yes, he should be impeached. And then they went so far as to ask, well, how would you feel about a President Pence? And they were like, oh, no, he's bad too. he needs to be impeached too. And I'm like, this has nothing to do with Trump. I feel bad for him because he was the one, and he makes it so easy for them to, you know, by not being polished, which is one of the reasons that I kind of like him, is that he's not polished and he steps in it every once in a while. And but he just has, I feel like there's a genuine person in there. And for being a billionaire, I feel like he relates to me a lot more than all these other elitists that are telling me that they relate to me, but they have no idea what goes on in the rest of the world. I mean, gee whiz, it's so disconnected.
Yeah, it's insane. It's one of those things that I agree with you. I like that he's not afraid to step in it, because you have to have that willingness to not be afraid and just kind of be genuine. And if you feel something in the moment, run with it. So we have all these issues going on in Virginia with the sanctuary states and with the sanctuary counties and how they're breaking this all down. How do you think it plays out in Virginia based on kind of your expertise? And I know you're out there and you're hearing what the people are saying.
I have no idea. I'm hearing some stuff that I'm not going to repeat because I don't know if it's for public consumption. But you know, I look at Virginia and I'm like a little sad that from what I understand, there were not a whole lot of Republicans running. They were not, you know, we have to, the conservative people in the world or the gun lovers in the world, whether you're left or right, we have to have good quality, constitutionally sound people run for office. You know, it's just disgusting that we don't have some kind of term limits, you know, whether it be 20 years or, you know, it shouldn't be a 40-year career of living off the government tip. It should be serving your community and getting in, getting out. I understand there's a learning curve there, but that, I feel like that's why there's such a stronghold on the deep state that the left doesn't want to even admit that's, you know, because I believe the deep state is left and right.
Right.
I think, you know, I'm not just looking at the Democrats and going, oh, it's just you. I think it's the entire system that's broken, and that's why everybody hated Trump to begin with. So I was going somewhere with that, and I just can't remember where it was.
It'll come back to you.
I'll finish that thought. That thought to me is that, like you said, it's not left, it's not right. It's our politicians as a whole. And when they sit in those positions for 5, 10, 15, 20, 35 years, you're like, okay, what are you really doing differently? Like, what fresh ideas are you bringing to the table? You know, you're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again, and you're going to keep taking money from the same people that are going to expect the same things back. And it's just corruption across the board, in my eyes at least.
Well, and I guess it was where I started was that we need good, solid people to run. And we also have to go vote. You know, there's so few people that vote, and the antis and the left are so motivated. They're so well funded. You know, the DC project going forward in 2020, I really want to let the reins go a little bit and expand, go down into the state level and do our deal there with the legislators, but also kind of basically just troll the commie mommies. And if there's a hearing or if there's something going on at the Supreme Court, like 2 weeks ago, the Supreme Court heard that gun case. So they send a couple of hundred people there in red shirts. And I'm like, our side has not been countering their message for at least 5 to 8 years that they've been in existence. And they are really being effective, as to use, you know, the common sense word, the gun violence word. They're like masters at messaging, and they're doing really good work to influence people, and we are not doing that. You know, the truth has to be spoken at some point, but it's really hard when they've got that snowball going, and it's going hard, and they're gaining steam, and that's exactly what happened to Virginia. You know, we had some voter complacency and not good candidates, and now we're looking at, you know, civil uprising.
Go ahead, Rory.
Yeah, not to mention, I mean, even if we get the opportunity to put a good message out there with actual facts and actual common sense, because their common sense is not common sense usually 90% of the time, it usually gets shut down one way or another. Like with Facebook and stuff like that, if we try to spread an article like, oh, this concealed carry person, took down a guy that was, in the middle of committing a felony or in the middle of committing violence on another person, it gets shut out of social media because the algorithms, they don't want to hear about it. The algorithms just downplay it so nobody sees it. Message never gets spread. Same thing across, other platforms as well. But when it's an anti-gun message, it gets spread all over the place like nobody's business.
Social media and mainstream media. I mean, you don't hear anything. You don't hear diddly squat about what's going on in Virginia. Of course, impeachment is kind of a big deal. But I think it's also a big deal when you have 5,000 people show up at a board of supervisors meeting and trying to flip your county back to a 2A sanctuary. I mean, and this is what's so bizarre about it, is that we've allowed it to be a partisan issue. It's not a partisan issue. If you're a Democrat and you're listening to this, the Second Amendment is for you too. And if you think Donald Trump is a tyrant, you should be the last person to think that they want to give up their guns.
Oh, I agree with that. And listen, that's an age-old tactic, Rory. If it bleeds, it leads. And everybody's trying to get, their 15 minutes. And even on social media, everyone's trying to get their agenda across. And at the end of the day, I don't think anytime soon we're going to see that favor a positive concealed carry story out there. And I'll be critical for a second. I know I don't want to get in this. I know it might be a sore subject for you, Di, but I think there's a failure on the part of the not just the NRA, but just all in general. And I've told them many times to help us create these narratives and push these narratives out there and get these good stories out there. And there's just not enough people. I'm going to say something. When an organization is too worried about selling memberships and pushing memberships based on fear, and they're losing sight of the good story and getting the story out there that really will ultimately lead to the support. And I feel there's no better time for that than now. And that's one of the huge disconnects, because there's a huge disconnect between getting the facts out there and placing the facts in front of the people and saying, here's what's going on. A woman was murdered, raped, assaulted on a college campus. She had a concealed carry permit. She was not allowed to carry it. That's a story that should have a gazillion dollars worth of ads behind it and should be pushed out there. She should be in front of podiums. Instead, the left gets allowed to traipse out there these the girl who runs around and talks about the weather, and they put these people out there, and they're worried about all these issues. But they're not looking at the facts. And I feel the biggest disconnect is these lawmakers get allowed to wave a wand without any type of coalition, any type of understanding. There's no conversation with anybody who's a good gun owner. There's no people brought in that own FFLs. There's no discussion about what the ramifications of that will be. And then they do it, and they look around and they do this guy. Oh, what happened? Why the law enforcement, they're not listening to us, and this one's not listening to us, and they're stunned. And I call it like amnesia. They get selective amnesia. All of a sudden, they're like, "Oh, how did this happen?" And oh my God! And what's going to happen is, in some ways, the left will continue to dig a hole for themselves deeper and deeper and deeper that they're not going to be able to come out of. In my opinion. That's my opinion, because at the end of the day, it's not going to fly in Virginia. There's too much of a populace there that's pro-gun, and there's just enough. And that's the wrong state to have this go down in as a bellwether. And they're going to lose, and I think they're going to lose bad. That's my prediction. I know you've heard some things, but I think...
I hope so, but it's just kind of sad that, it's like there's really no bridging. It's only dividing.
Yep.
You're taking one side or the other, and that's what's so scary, is that I don't ever see our country coming back together. I've often joked about, we need to get a divorce. And just let the left take the left and the right take the right, use the Mississippi and go on about our merry ways. But that's just kind of unjust. I don't know how that would happen, but I certainly don't want to see civil war either.
I think it's absolutely only going to get worse, because the Democrats don't have a candidate to save their life, and they don't have a candidate coming up to save their life. The only decent candidate they had, they ran into the ground. The one, what's her face, out of Hawaii. She was the only good.
Liked her.
Yeah, she was the only good candidate worth a cent, and she's a Republican for all intents and purposes. She just happens to live in a.
Gun.
What?
She's anti-gun.
She's anti-gun, but I think that's an issue she could sway on. I believe it in my heart. She just did Joe Rogan and she was with Jocko, and I think she could sway on that a little bit. And by and large, I think she's a product of an insanely, left state. So I think that could change in a national election, and I think that she would need to bring that. She just doesn't have the constituency behind her right now, but in time she could be a rising star. But the party hates her, and it's run her into the ground, so it's only a matter of time. But, at the end of the day, staying on this Virginia thing, I think that the Democrats have made a lot of decisive, poor decisions, and it's a poor decision to try to carry out the impeachment because they're going to lose, and they're going to lose huge. And they're going to look really bad because they might get it through the House. It's not going to get through the Senate. We all know that. They look stupid along the way because there's no concrete facts being presented, and they look like buffoons every day in front of and with these snips and these clips coming out because they don't understand the soundbite system. And then the other side of it is you're trying to do this vacuum process in Virginia with the guns, and it's going to absolutely blow up in your face. You're going to have 70, 80, you're going to climb all the way. You're already at almost 100% of the counties going full sanctuary, and none of the cops are going to execute that order. Nobody's going to execute that order. And what it's going to cause them, I think, down the line is they're going to re-examine some of these red flag laws or the wide open use of red flag laws. And this is a story that has to be written. It has to be written by someone that's competent, and it has to be put out there, and it has to be pushed.
Well, I actually was floating the idea. I was like, is there a recall? Is there, any kind of recall now that we've awoken the giant? Is there any kind of recall system? So they're kind of looking into that. But, I remember posting, it was before the election, so probably September time period. I saw an interview with Moms Demand Action, Shannon Watts, and she was talking about how much money they were pouring into Virginia, $2.5 million that they alone were pouring into Virginia. And I'm sitting there, it's all about the messaging, and it's all about, and when I take that messaging a step further, I wanted to tell you about this. September, October, I went to the New York Times Deal Book. Did we talk about this before?
No, but go ahead. Yeah.
So this is a one-day conference. It was huge. It was amazing. I felt like almost like a spy being in there because I swear I was the only conservative, me and Chris Chang. I asked to take somebody with me because I wasn't going to go sit on this 90-minute task force with CEOs talking about corporate activism. So real quick, basically, if you saw the Dick's piece that I did on CBS Sunday morning, It was talking about how he admitted that they lost $250 million, $250 million they lost. And he's willing to do that because he feels like the gun issue is something that he's willing to take the moral high ground on. Now, that's exactly what this conversation was. Every town was in there. There was a couple of other advocates. There were two fathers from Parkland. And then there was me, Chris Chang, and four CEOs from different groups from Royal Caribbean, Levi's, Citigroup, and another new company that the guy was from Google. But they have all drank the Kool-Aid. They looked at us, they talked to us like we were, one woman, one activist was very harsh and talked to us like we were idiots. And and then it's not the Parkland ads too. They talked to us like we were idiots, but they just have drank the Kool-Aid. They can't hear, they can't see anything past what guns, got to take the guns away. And these CEOs are prepared to move their corporations in that. If you heard right before that, there was 150 CEOs of major corporations that sent a letter to the Senate saying you have to do something about gun violence. I'm like, okay, let's do something about gun violence. Let's go ahead and put education back in our schools, firearms education. That's what I want to do. When I feel like education over legislation is actually what's going to make us safer. But anyway, back to prepping for this. This is why I was so freaking scared. When I was prepping for this, I was talking to a gentleman who was explaining what shareholder resolutions do. So basically, a shareholder will bring a resolution to the board and say, let's use Yeti and NRA. I don't know if this, I can see this as how it's happened. Now that I have seen this, I can see a shareholder resolution going to the Yeti board and saying, Yeti, we want to do something about gun violence, and if you don't sever your ties with the NRA, we are going to launch a social media storm. We are going to turn all our people loose, and we are going to destroy your brand. So Yeti, from a business decision, they're like, okay, all I have to do is just stop having a relationship with the NRA, and I don't have all this headache. So they're doing that. The left, whether it be about guns, whether it be about environment, whether it be about abortion, the left, the liberal side is doing that 300 to 400 times a year, whereas the conservative side is doing it to 20 to 40 times a year. We aren't even in the same ballpark. We think we're at the game, but we're in the parking lot.
Right. That's a good point. I just think it's going to come to a head at some point, and it's going to bubble over. I mean, at this point, with them talking about bringing in the National Guard and all these different things to enforce the law, I just think at some point it's going to come to a head. And the good thing about our process here in this country is states become a little bit of a vacuum and a little bit of a bellwether, and we can see how things perform. And I think ultimately, yes, they might control the House and Senate, but they don't control the passion and the morality and what they feel is right in Virginia. And that's where they're going to lose, because at the end of the day, the gun issue is one of those issues that becomes not just a constitutional issue, but people believe it's almost religious. It's their moral inherent right to own and possess a firearm, and I think they totally underestimate that. And bringing in the National Guard and escalating it to these types of situations is going to be a major, major issue. And I try to talk about this almost removing my own bias from it and trying to get people to understand how people feel about it. It's an issue that it's like religion, and you can't legislate that. You cannot tell people what they can and cannot be a part of. And people feel the Constitution in the everything that's inside of, whether it's the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Third Amendment, that is their right. That is bestowed upon them by the Founding Fathers. That is their right. Now, you can debate all day long about muskets, hunting, whatever it is you want to talk about, but attempting to pass sweeping legislation to just make that disappear is where they're making a fatal mistake, in my opinion.
That's true, and I like your analogy of evangelizing, because it's exactly the same. But how effective am I if I come at somebody who doesn't know me and go, do you know Jesus?
Of course, you're right.
And that's exactly what we have to do as gun owners. We can't come at them and go, it's my constitutional right. You can't, we have to be better, and we have to train ourselves on how to communicate these positions, these hostile conversations that we're having with our neighbors, our family. Families are breaking up over this issue. So there's something that we can do, and that is to train ourselves on how to have these conversations. And you have to dig in, just like if you were going to have any kind of conversation about Christ. You kind of have to know what you're talking about. It's a never-ending education on both sides. But you have, right now on the gun debate, you got to know what your position is on universal background checks. That universal background checks are not enforceable without a registration, and a registration always leads to confiscation, and confiscation is what we fear. You have to know what you think about red flag laws. You have to have an answer for it besides it's just my constitutional right.
Absolutely.
You have to say that I know Carrie Sloan, and I know that without a firearm she couldn't protect herself, and that they are easily manipulated and used to disarm victims. So there's a lot of preaching to the choir. We have to teach the choir. I've heard too many gun owners say, I'm a gun owner, but it makes common sense. They have bought into this deal that it's the gun, that it's it's the AR-15 platform. And we have to do a better job of shepherding our group and teaching. But there isn't any kind of, information going out there that Thanksgiving's coming up. Here's how you have conversations, because I saw documents from Mom's Demand of here's how you have a conversation with your parents. You know,
I think you're absolutely right, and I think we both know where that failure lies and who's supposed to be at the forefront of it, and who's supposed to be the group that helps create that narrative and helps shape that story and helps push it out there to the masses. I think we both can agree on that. There's no question that down the line, as time goes on, I think this continues to escalate. And you're absolutely right. It comes down to educating those that are having conversations. We can simplify it here because we can simplify it here because we understand each other and we understand how passionate people are. But at the end of the day, I believe the PC or correct fix lies in getting together. And I would be quite all right with a Democrat that says, geez, I really want to examine gun laws and gun restrictions. And I'd like to sit down with a group of gun owners, and I'd like to sit down with some gun shop owners. I don't think anybody would get mad at that. I don't think
political suicide. Are you kidding? They would go watch No Safe Spaces. Have you seen it?
Yeah. I know where you're going. Go ahead.
The left has created monsters in these colleges that they can't even control.
Right, exactly. And they can't control them.
There isn't any kind of, let's have a conversation, because even if they were, I saw a woman today from, I think, Michigan or Minnesota that was a Democrat, and she's talking all, normal and having a conversation about this impeachment thing. And she said, if I don't get reelected, I just have to know that I did what I think was right. Mm-hmm. And that's few and far between of people who will look out for what they think is right, as opposed to following the party line, towing the party line, and doing what the party tells them to do. So that's why it's so important to, if you feel called to run for office, run for office. I don't care whether it's school board, local, city, state, federal. And we've got like 2.5 girls. We got 2 girls running for Congress next year from the DC project, and we got one that's sitting on the fence, and I'm pushing her as hard as I can.
Oh yeah, she should.
Yeah,
she absolutely should.
The DC project needs our own Bloomberg. So I don't know if there's a Bloomberg out there. Is there a Bloomberg?
We got to find one. We have to find one, and it's gonna be insanely interesting how a lot of this plays out and how the gun violence thing gets addressed. Now, people have been critical of Trump because of how he's approached some of these things and how he's approached some gun laws, and I understand that. But at the same token, I think there's a lot to sift through, and I've said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. A lot of the roots of the gun issue and the firearms issue in a lot of states and within a lot of communities is you have a situation where you're issued a permit by the town that you lived in or the sheriff's department or the local chief. You're educated to get that permit, usually by a civilian, by someone who issues you an NRA certificate, and it's given to you by the state. So it's one of those things, nobody wants the responsibility. So nobody wants to come in with a clear directive. Nobody wants to come in and, as I said earlier, have a clear conversation. And you brought up a good point. As far as educating goes, they can't even control their side of the table and get their side of the table corralled. And the one thing the Democrats have done a great job on, you've touched on this, is kind of controlling the college campuses and having those campuses be, the radical side of the party and put this radical message out there. But to your point, they can't even control that side. So it's causing them what I would call a lot of fatigue, and it's actually causing them a lot of grief, especially in the social media environment that we live in now, because a lot of these snippets and clips, every day I'm seeing a clip go by Twitter that some left crazy is knocking out another kid on the campus because they wear a MAGA hat or they brought up an issue and wanted to talk about it, and it's making national headlines. I would love to see the statistics on liberal assaults, physical assaults on
here in mainstream media is going to be how white supremacists are rise in numbers and the attacks on minorities. And I mean, that's all they focus on. I'm completely, from what I see just myself reported in the news, I think you're 100% correct that there are at least more attacks from the left to the right than there is the right to the left.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to see the stats on it. But the real question is, because you're the expert in many ways, in my opinion, how does it end? How does this play out? Are we close to, I know a lot of crazy YouTubers and people put videos out there where we're close to a revolution and this and that. How does this play out as we head into the new year? It's going to be a really interesting SHOT Show. It's going to be a really interesting January as we kind of roll into this and this stuff plays out, and you have the election and you have the impeachment process.
Well, I'm going to start with, I'm no expert. I'm just
you're the expert.
I'm just a 22-year veteran police officer that's now a professional shooter and has a heart to try to make a difference. So I am no different than anybody else. I've just been paying attention for maybe 5 years now, of really realizing it's just getting people engaged and getting people to pay attention, so we don't end up like Virginia. If you do not, I mean, it's going to be a clear vote in 2020, and I don't care if you love or hate Trump. Your choices are going to be a socialist, and if they don't say they're a socialist, they are misleading you. and Trump. So you're going to have our country has a very clear choice to make in 2020. And I honestly, not Joey Behar, I don't know if you saw that he said, don't tell them you're going to take your guns. Lie to them, tell them after you get elected that you're going to take, and then take their guns. And I'm like, how dishonest can you be? Oh, it's just disgusting. It's just disgusting.
Yeah, it's getting out of control. I see so many of these attacks lacking facts and lacking basis and lacking understanding and basic knowledge. And to your point, there is an educational component. And I know we're all not touching the third rail here, but I believe a lot of this falls on the inability for the NRA and other parent organizations and people that are supposed to be stumping for a lot of these causes to step up and start to create initiatives that offer not only education, but also offer an understanding. In my opinion, now is the time for somebody like the NRA to come in and say, we're going to have, 4 ballrooms at SHOT Show, and we're offering education on how to approach being an FFL in your community, how to approach doing this in your community.
Yeah.
No, keep going, Di.
No, I like that's a great idea. Keep going.
I was going to say, this is and if I was in charge of marketing at the NRA for one day, and write this down, Rory, because take this clip, I would absolutely make this an opportunity to get out in front of this, get out in front of the issue, take the time to say, hey guys, we're going to buy 4 ballrooms at SHOT Show. We're going to buy 4 ballrooms at the next NRA show in Nashville. And we're going to take the time to educate not only FFLs, but gun owners. And we're offering this for free. So we're going to give you, whether it's a media kit, a press packet, something on how to address these issues, and give you talking points, give you facts, give you bullet points, and start to develop what you're talking about. Not only leaders in the community, potential running candidates, and strong personalities in the community that can not only step up and speak with education, but also offer more than it's my right or it's the Second Amendment. And this is a failure on their part, whether it be because they're too worried about bringing on personalities to the NRA that can talk about fear tactics and fear mongering, whether it's they're worried about doing X or doing Y, or getting more press time for someone to sell a book or for someone to sell a gym membership, whatever the fuck it is. And I think it's a huge mistake on a lot of their parts by not getting out in front of it and not doing things like this. If I go to one more party, one more, hey, we're going to have a band and a swanky this, I'm going to throw up.
Right. I totally.
Not going to any more parties.
The whole argument these days that, oh, it's my right, this and this, that, it's a Second Amendment. I mean, like Diana's saying, it just doesn't fly anymore. But education and facts, and to be able to relay that in a good manner to that person, whoever you're speaking to be able to get their mind to turn and mind to think, that will change their mind and that will make them think. Like my brother, for example, he came out a couple months ago to visit, and he was like, oh, I don't think you should have an AR-15, da-da-da-da. And I'm like, well, tell me why you don't think I should have an AR-15. And he was like, well, because people use those in mass shootings and da-da-da-da-da. So when I started breaking down the facts to him, I was like, well, why do you want to go after guns? Oh, to stop gun violence. Okay. Well, if you were to go after guns to stop gun violence, you'd realize that, an AR-15 is a very, very small portion of gun deaths as a whole. And you start looking at some of the facts and things like, how often they're used in suicides and other things. And I'm not going to name what I think should, what would be the big standout thing in that, argument. But I could see the wheels in his head turning like, oh, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. And the whole AR-15 argument, I think they're just going after it because that's what they think people want to hear right now, and that's what they want to. The Democrats want everybody to think like, oh, we're trying to stop this gun violence, and getting rid of the AR-15s is what's going to do it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if you look into the facts, you're like, oh, okay, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense on why you'd go after the AR-15.
No.
Same thing, with gun-free zones and stuff like that. At the end of the day, it's like how many of these school shootings have happened in gun-free zones? I'm pretty sure all those schools were all gun-free zones. And not that we're going to, have students in high school take guns to school, but, if a teacher was armed or something like that, it could have...
Parents dropping their kids off.
Yeah, parents dropping their kids off. And
prosecuted. On to, back to the stuff going on at SHOT Show. For your audience's sake, let's discriminate or decipher. What's the D word I'm looking for? NRA is for the public as NSSF is for the businesses.
Right.
So there are a lot of, at SHOT Show, there are a lot of education pieces. If you look for them, I'm going to go to Black Guns Matter. I'm actually teaching a class for managers how to leverage your brand ambassadors, which is kind of a compliment to the Ambassador Academy, which I know we talked about.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So these are things that from the SHOT Show perspective, there's a whole education, SHOT Show University, I think it's called. And then the NRA, I will definitely go back to the NRA and see if we can't plug in some sort of education piece. I'm sure they have something. I'm just really not aware of it yet. So those are good. Those are good points. And and I want John. You're going to have to come to the Ambassador Academy.
I'll come when you ask me to speak. I have so many ideas, and the problem is that I've talked to not only top officials of the NRA that I text and talk with, but people at the NSSF. The problem is me with the type of attitude I have. I offer as many and as abrupt immediate solutions as humanly possible because I believe a good plan executed now is better than a great plan laid out later. And I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of people. I look at the NSSF and the NRA in many ways as like my local Rotary Club. They want to give awards to their friends, and they want to do barbecues, and they want to do parties. Stop putting the fucking band up at the end of the night. Put somebody up there who can actually speak and actually hold a conversation, and shame on everyone who goes to these events and takes the free food and takes all the crap and everything else that goes on there and doesn't want to strike now while the iron is hot because the clock's ticking. We hopefully have another 4 years, and if we do and we don't take advantage of it to go after things like national reciprocity and fixing these problems, it's a major mistake and it's a major failure, and we're gonna be sitting around at those same parties 4 years from now, and we're gonna say we blew it.
I can't disagree. But on the since I'm trying to fundraise, I understand that there are some fundraising things. So those people with large pockets, they like those parties.
Of course.
Yeah. So until we find the Bloomberg and they tell me exactly what it is that makes them part with their money, I can't throw any stones.
They're out there. The thing is, they're out there because I talked to them at night. I talked to one major ammunition company owner at length. And this gentleman, and you may or may not know who, I'm sure you know who he is if I said it, but there are people looking for the right places and looking for the right people to get involved with. And the thing is, because of things that have happened with some of these organizations, they're very cautious about where they put their money. They want to know where their money's going. They don't want their money going towards $200,000 drapes. They want their money going in the right directions. And I'm being critical, and I'm on my soapbox a little bit today. You guys caught me on a good day with some of this stuff, and I have a lot of friends there, and if they listen to this, they would probably be upset about it. But at the end of the day, it has to be said, because I know a lot of these people at these organizations intimately, and I know that you know that I do. And the problem is a lot of them sit there collecting their salary, putting their little posts up, doing the things that they do, and they think that's enough. It's not enough. Someone needs to come in with a plan. Someone needs to come in and execute, and it needs to get done. And at the end of the day, there's too much glad handing and too much patting on the back and too many awards being given to their buddies on the floor and not enough people getting up there and coming up with strategies. I spend my whole day talking to companies companies, and Rory, I know you know that this is true, and I've confronted marketing directors and people at very large companies, and I've asked the question, what's your content creation program? How do you create content? How do you do things? How do you, and they look at me like I have 10 heads, and these are large companies, big companies I looked up to for a lot of years, and they look at me like I'm crazy. And I was legitimately on the phone with a very influential person at one very large company. I have to be careful how I say this. And he literally, and I'm listening to him, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. It's rolling out the same bad ideas, and it's not enough. It's just not enough. And everybody wants to run around and have no plan and no direction. And someone needs to come into some of these organizations and have a plan and have direction and have an understanding. And at the end of the day, from where I sit in the office that I work with, the brands I work with, I can always come back to, if here's my strategy, here's what I do. You know, Rory knows how methodical I am in this office and how I approach things. And it needs to be the same thing with these organizations. But the problem is everybody's in their mid to late 40s to 58, 59, 60 years old. They don't want to change. They don't want to affect their paycheck because they're worried about their daughter or son in college and making sure that things get paid. I don't care. At the end of the day, I don't have to worry about those things, so I speak the truth and I say what's on my mind and I say how I feel and how I look at the lay of the land. And I get that you have to do certain things to fundraise and to raise money, and things like that need to be done, but we need to be as passionate about these other things as we are about those to make these initiatives work, because then more people will advocate the good that's coming out of them, like the things that you're doing with your programs and the things that you're trying to put in place with your education. But unfortunately, I see the same bad programs rolled out year after year after year, in horrible solutions. And that's why at the end of the day, the firearms industry, whether it comes down to how it markets itself and how it carries itself, is about 10 years behind every other industry, and that's why we fail. Go look at everybody's Instagram page. It's gun photo after gun photo after gun photo after gun photo. Why are we so afraid to put a voice behind that? People like you that are out there with a great, strong voice, they need to come out of the shadows and they need to talk. And at the end of the day, posting pictures isn't helping us. Go look at Heckler & Koch's Instagram. It's all pictures of just guns. You're supposed to be one of the beacons of the industry.
You're kind of preaching to the choir.
I don't want to bash anybody's brand that's out there that people work for, but at the end of the day, go look at these companies. You're supposed to be the biggest advocates.
Maybe you need to come to my class and help me teach the brand ambassador managers, the sponsorship managers, because it's the marketing teams.
You know, I'll do anything you ask. You know that.
All right.
You'll never have to ask me twice. You know that. You sent the time and the date over to do this, and I said it's yours. Done.
That's awesome.
You know you'll never ask me twice. But at the end of the day, I go and I speak at some of these events locally here, and I've done a couple recently on content creation and how to develop. And I show them, podcasting. But our biggest failure, I feel, the last 2 years and probably the next 3 or 4, is the failure for companies to put a voice behind a lot of these things. People still want to do photos. They want to do quick little videos, like we're filming a trailer for John Wick every week. Like, that's great and all, but at the end of the day, what are we doing to move the movement forward? What are we doing to help the movement? Who's getting out there and speaking?
And I do feel like these companies have invested wisely and very good people. I mean, look at Jerry Mitchell. He's our Michael Jordan of our industry.
Love Jerry.
You don't see him being used like he could be used to be a face and to be a voice, like you're talking about, to make the gun industry personable. I mean, who can not like Jerry?
And I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be 100% critical of that. Jerry should be way out in the front, and it's not his fault. The problem is when companies, that are running the marketing for the NRA or for some of these other groups or NSSF, they go and they pick these social media people that, like I said, either they're selling gym memberships or they're selling this or they're trying to push that and they're trying to fearmonger. They're not offering concrete education. And someone like Jerry comes in, it scares the hell out of people, because here's a guy with no offense, Jerry, 1,000 years of experience, and you're not that old, but he's, him and Kay, who's better than both of them to be out in front? Who's better than both of them?
I know.
I mean,
that's why I think it's so important for me to try to reach out and offer these companies and these brand managers encourage them to take advantage of the things that they've already invested in and how to leverage. The whole class is called Leveraging Your Brand Ambassador. So it's just funny that you bring that up.
Yeah.
But I ask you to.
Yeah, it's absolutely important, and I think your mission is a big. I mean, in my opinion, they should put you in charge of the whole thing, whether it's the NSSF or the NRA, and they should bring someone in like you that says, "Look, we're going to do common sense stuff, and we're going to educate people." But I feel the failure starts always at the base. You can't build a house on mud. You have to build it on a strong foundation. The problem is running around this industry, and I know that you know this is true. You have a lot of people, especially at the big companies, that have little to no experience in the firearms industry that get brought in from these outside companies, and then on top of that too, you have people that get brought in from the social media side, and all they know how to post is gun porn, gun photos. Hey, I'm going to post a photo of this, I'm going to post a photo of that. I mean, come on.
It seems like on social media, it seems like companies are scared to, like, they're so...
No, they're lazy. There's a difference. They're lazy.
No, here's what I hear. I hear that they're so scared to not get the numbers. It's like they're a teenager that's addicted to their phone and are trying to get all those likes. It's like, I'm like, it's in your marketing division. Your job should be to, throw up a bunch of different stuff and make people want to buy guns and gear or whatever it is your company's selling. Don't stay within that, our audience doesn't like that. Let's just, how about we fail and then tap into another audience and grow?
I think they're lazy because, as I said to you before, I look at industries like the action sports market. I look at industry, energy drinks. I look at all these different industries, and I look at even what Trump and what other people are doing and how they're having success on social media and how they're leveraging social media. Have a message. If I was to pick up the phone right now and call the top 4 or 5 gun companies and challenge them to this, what is your message on social media? They'd probably be crickets on the phone for 10 minutes. You want to know why? Because the person behind the social media account is probably a $40,000 or $50,000 a year flunky. And I laugh at that because at the end of the day, your largest audience is there, yet you pay the person the least in your organization to run it.
That's a good point.
And that is disgusting.
Not even in their organization, it's third party hired out.
100%. I know who's behind these accounts. So I'm not shocking the world saying this, just to let everybody know. And I know that I know everybody who's behind these accounts. I know who runs them. And at the end of the day, it's a huge failure. It's a huge failure. And the reason the hunting market's ahead in many ways, and it is, and I'm going to give my hats off to the hunting market for a second, is because they're doing a better job creating a voice. But until these owners and until a lot of these companies start to realize they need to put a voice behind the company and they need to start to create a narrative and they need to start to shape a message, and until they start to feel a responsibility to protect their trade and protect their business by creating a message, someone else is going to control the narrative. You control technology or technology will control you.
Ooh, that was good. That was really good. So what can we do on, let's talk about the Ambassador Academy a little bit and what the brand ambassadors can do and expect at the Ambassador Academy. So to recap, last year was this year, 2019 was the first year I tried doing this. It was my 10th year in this space, and I've always wanted training when it comes to social media, analytics, and strategy. I wanted to know how to film and edit stuff. I wanted to know how to have those hostile conversations. So I hired subject matter experts in all of that. I hired a photographer. I'm going to hire 2 photographers in 2020 because those are the tangible things that companies can actually have. If we do a photo shoot with their ambassadors and we do a photo shoot with their product, and that's the tangible thing that companies can go. So it's a 5-day class. It's right in front of USPSA Multi-Gun Nationals down in Florida, outside of Orlando, where we call it Tactical Disneyland. It's a private range. And it's an amazing facility. You're going to get 1 day of personal protection, situational awareness, and like low light, force on force type stuff. We're going to do that because that is honestly in our industry for sure. But even just being a conservative, you talk about the kids that are getting attacked for wearing MAGA hats. I mean, there are things that you can do and there are things that you can do to protect yourself. So I think that's important for our ambassadors to be prepared for. So that's day 1. And then the other 4 days are going to be focused on the communication side, the filming and editing side. There's some live fire going on. Josh Fralick will be back doing our live fire stuff. So it's an amazing, everybody really enjoyed it. I didn't get to participate so much as I was herding cats and
shepherding.
But, yeah, shepherding. I was shepherding. So I'm looking forward to 2020, March 28th to April 1st in 2020. And I need companies to be able to step up and realize that they want to invest. If you're investing in these brand ambassadors already, you should want to send the brand ambassador to this to get a better return on your investment. And for the bigger picture, you know, if they can speak eloquently about the Second Amendment or whatever it may be, not that you want them to go out and be a Second Amendment advocate, just so that they can have a conversation, because they're going to get hit with some sort of anti-gun question at some point, just being an ambassador for somebody in the industry.
In my humble opinion, the NRA should come in and fund the whole thing for you, and you should be able to invite people, key people, to it. And you should be able to extend that out to the companies and the brands by saying, buy them the plane ticket, and they'll be able to generate media at this event that they're getting educated in, that they're doing it. And it's just there's a couple ways I would do it, but I think at the end of the day, someone should come in and write a big check, and you should be able to invite whoever you want.
Well, I want you in charge.
It's easier said than done, I know, but I that's the dream, right? Someone comes in and says, and then you can go out and you can get the top 10 or top 15 people, but at the end of the day, I think the top ones kind of know what they're doing. They know enough, obviously, otherwise they wouldn't have the reach that they have. But those mid-level players that are up and coming, especially the young ones, we got a whole young group that's going to have a lot of responsibility coming up. We got the Colby Pavlocks, we have the Cheyenne Daltons, we have the folks out there that they're going to be coming up. They're going to be the next voices and the next faces, and they have to be ready, because we're getting old. I'm 100 years old. I can't do this anymore.
Right. I've already told Beth Walker. She's from Indiana. She's an amazing girl. She's a senior in high school, and I've already told her I'm bringing her in. She's on my little advisory board, and I was like, you should pay attention, because one of these days I'm stepping away and this is going to be yours.
Oh yeah, it's your headache now, Yeah. But no, it's an awesome thing, and like I said, I'm a huge advocate of it, and I think at the end of the day, I would love to see somebody big come in and write a big check towards it to get, whether it's 10 or 20 or 30 seats funded. How many seats are you trying to fill?
16.
Okay.
It's a very small, intimate class.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why. So 16, you're asking for about 4 Gs per, so you're looking for 6, 12, 18, 25. So you're looking for about 60 Gs to make it all come together. I see no reason why one company can't bite the bullet and come in for at least half of that right off the bat and say, you know what, Dianna, do what you want with the tickets. Give them to whoever. That's what I would go after.
Let's you and I go talk to some people at SHOT Show.
I'll talk to anyone you want. I mean, I'll tell anyone you want. I mean, definitely give me a press kit. I'll put my money where my mouth is, and I'll talk to a couple of the right people. And I think you absolutely, and I'm going to say it right on air, I think you absolutely should take that and you should send it to Jason We Met at NRA. And you should be like, Jason, I'm not hanging up the phone until you give me at least 15 grand, something.
He actually celebrated with me after I did my testimony, so he showed up.
Yeah, I would pick up the phone and say, remember that celebration? Cut a check. And I'm not. Right. I'd say I'm not hanging up till you do.
You've given me a lot to do. So.
Well, I give away more good ideas than I keep for myself. So I love this. This is awesome, and I think we absolutely need to do it again. Believe it or not, it's been an hour. Hopefully, we covered everything. Let everybody know where they can find you and how they can look you up.
They can look me up on Instagram as Di3Gun, on Facebook is Dianna Muller 3Gun, and then the DC Project is dcproject.info, and the Ambassador Academy is at pro3gunner.com. pro3gunner.com is where the Ambassador Academy lives. And then I also want to make a plug. If any of you guys are shooters, we had the most amazing fundraiser match. It's a 2-man team 3-gun match, and it's going to be on Halloween 2020. So put it on your calendars. Come down to Texas and have a great time supporting a great cause.
In SHOT Show, where are you going to be?
Man, I'll be everywhere. You tell me where to be, and I'll be there.
Yeah, we're going to put something down, you and I want you to come by, and I want to catch up with you face-to-face for sure.
Okay.
100%. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking the time. We're going to do this again. This isn't the last you've heard of her, and it's certainly not the last you've heard of me. So, Rory, I think we covered everything. Di, you've been great. I love you, and I love what you're doing. And we're definitely going to do this again, probably at some point mid-January for sure, before SHOT. And hopefully we'll be able to get this cut up and out there so everybody can hear it. This will be hot right away, I think, on all the places podcasts are heard, right, Rory? We got this live, so it looked like it clicked over and it's working. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, and we're hot on YouTube. So get out there, share this. This is a great message. This is a great cause. Don't forget to support everything that she's doing with the DC Project. Don't forget to support everything that she's doing with the pro3gunner.com, where you can check out and read all about everything that she has going on with the Ambassador Academy. It's a phenomenal program. It's a great project. I think we're going to get this thing funded at some level, shape, or form and be able to get some great folks out there. And I think it's going to be a phenomenal venture. And thank you enough. Can't thank you enough, Di, for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate it. Rory, we're out. Cut it.
Have a Merry Christmas.
You too.